It started with a stupid joke. Friday night, just after 10. Adam had slouched halfway down into my recliner, chewing through a microwave burrito with all the grace of a raccoon. Marcy was sprawled sideways on my couch, legs tangled in a throw blanket she never actually unfolded, scrolling through her phone and laughing at whatever she wasn't sharing with us. The three of us hung out maybe once every 2 weeks, just enough to not feel like strangers, but infrequent enough that we recycled the same conversations. That night's topic? Home security. Marcy had mentioned some Reddit thread about break-ins caught on camera. That led to a few predictable stories from Adam about car thefts and catalytic converters, and how some guy at his work had a camera that caught a meth head crawling under his trailer like a goddamn mole. Creepiest one I saw, Marcy said, sitting up a little straighter, was this old dude in a bathrobe, just standing at someone's front door. 3 a.m. Didn't knock, didn't move, just stared straight into the camera like he was waiting for something. I've seen that one, Adam said, licking burrito grease off his thumb. It's always the ones who don't move that freak me out, like they're not there to steal, just watching. I've got a ring, I said, grabbing my phone off the coffee table. Want to see if there's a ghost waiting for us right now? I opened the app mostly for the bit. I wasn't expecting anything. I live in a quiet neighborhood, one of those transitional spots where the houses still had old mailboxes, but the garages were all new. My street rarely saw anything more suspicious than a misplaced Amazon package. I figured the feed would just show my empty porch, maybe the neighbor's tree if the wind picked up. The app loaded, spinning blue ring. Then the feed came on, and someone was standing there, right there, in the middle of the frame, facing the door, not walking up, not mid-step, just there. It took me a second to react. I said. You guys seeing this? Adam leaned over. Wait, what the hell? Marcy was already off the couch standing behind me. That's not a recording? No, this is the live feed. The man on the screen didn't move. He looked to be in his 50s or 60s, gaunt with shoulder-length hair that hung flat like it was wet. No hat, no gloves. Wearing a heavy black jacket zipped up to the collar. His eyes were pale and he was staring straight into the camera, not at the door, at the lens. He didn't shift, didn't blink, just stood there. Use the mic, Marcy said, lowering her voice. I tapped the microphone icon, cleared my throat. Hey, I said, can I help you? The man didn't react. He didn't even twitch. I tried again. Hello? Nothing. Do you need something? Still nothing. Adam stepped back. That's messed up, man. Was there a motion alert? Marcy asked. I backed out of the live feed and checked the event log. Nothing. No motion triggered. No video saved. No sound detected. The Ring app had no idea he was there. I reopened the feed. Still there. Okay, I'm checking, I said, already halfway to the front door. Wait, dude, Adam said. But I didn't stop. I looked through the peephole first. Nothing. Just my porch, same as always. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door. Cold night air rolled in. The porch light buzzed gently above me, empty. No one on the steps, no one on the sidewalk. The street was still. I looked left and right, down to the mailbox behind the bushes. Nothing. No footsteps, no sound, no sign of anyone. I backed up, shut the door and locked it. My hands were damp. I walked back into the living room. Adam was standing now. Marcy had my phone in her hands, scrolling through the app. He's gone, she said. There's nothing on here. Nothing? I asked. She showed me. The event history was still blank. No motion detected. No recording saved. I opened the live view again. The porch was empty. Did we all see him? I asked. Yeah, Adam said, nodding. Clear as day. Could it be a glitch? Marcy asked. Maybe the app lagged and showed an old recording? No way, I said. That wasn't old. It had live in the corner. And I've never seen that guy before in my life. We sat down again, quieter this time. The TV was still paused on some random movie menu. None of us said much. Marcy was the first to leave. She kept checking over her shoulder as she walked down the driveway. Adam stayed behind for another half hour. We didn't talk about the guy. We just sat with the show running in the background, both pretending we weren't still thinking about it. When he left, I triple locked the door. I checked the app again before heading to bed. Nothing on the feed, just the usual wide-angle view of the porch, light flickering slightly, sidewalk quiet. My car parked in its usual spot. I left the app open and set the phone on my nightstand. Every 10 minutes I looked over and tapped the screen. Still empty. After maybe an hour of this, I got up and opened the door again, just to make sure, same deal. Quiet street, still air. Eventually, I put the phone face down and tried to sleep. I didn't though, not really. I'd closed my eyes for a bit, then flipped the phone over again. Refreshed the app, still empty. I wasn't scared exactly, not yet, but something felt wrong, off. Like the camera had let something through, and now it was just waiting for me to stop looking. By morning, I hadn't gotten more than an hour of real sleep. I opened the Ring app again before getting out of bed. No alerts, no history. The man was never recorded. It felt like trying to explain a noise to someone who didn't hear it. You can replay it in your head, describe it in perfect detail, but when there's no proof, you start to doubt how real it was. Still, I knew what I saw. We all saw it. A live video feed. A man standing still watching. He didn't knock, didn't try the door, just stood there until we looked away. By noon, I'd almost convinced myself it had to be a glitch, a reflection. Maybe someone walked by and the app stitched frames weirdly. But even as I tried to believe that, I kept opening the app. Every few hours, then every hour, nothing. That night, I made sure the porch light stayed on. I turned my phone brightness all the way up and propped it against a coffee mug on the end table while I watched TV, just in case something appeared again, just so I could react. The feed stayed clear. By the time I went to bed, my eyes were sore from squinting at the screen. I plugged the phone in, opened the app again, and stared at the feed until my vision blurred. At 2:18 a.m., I checked one last time. Empty porch. Nothing there. Still, I didn't close the app. The next night, I checked the live feed more times than I wanted to admit. It had become almost reflexive. Unlock the phone, tap the Ring app, glance at the screen. I'd leave it open while I brushed my teeth or sat on the couch waiting for something to move in the frame. I didn't even know what I expected. Maybe I wanted proof that what happened the night before wasn't just some glitch or weird coincidence. Maybe I wanted the man to come back so I'd know I wasn't imagining things. Most of the day went by without incident. The porch remained empty each time I checked. No deliveries, no random pedestrians, just an empty set of steps under the porch light, with the shadows of the railings stretching across the concrete like prison bars. Around 11 p.m., I propped my phone on the kitchen counter while I made a late snack. Every couple of minutes I'd glance at it. Still nothing. I sat on the couch, phone in my hand, live feed open. That was when I saw her. At first, I thought maybe my phone was lagging and had pulled up some random static frame. But no, the feed had been live, and suddenly she was just there. She was standing on my porch like the man had, perfectly still. But this wasn't the same person. This was a woman, younger, maybe late 20s or early 30s. She wore a long beige coat that looked too thin for the weather. It hung open slightly, showing bare knees and pale legs. Her feet were bare. The skin on them looked dirty, dark around the toes, as though she'd been walking through wet soil. Her head was angled slightly downward, but I could see enough of her face to tell that she wasn't smiling, wasn't crying, just vacant. Her arms hung at her sides, hands limp. I stared at the screen, frozen. "Hello?" I said out loud, forgetting the mic button wasn't even pressed. I tapped the mic and tried again. "Hey, are you okay?" She didn't respond. She didn't even flinch, just like the man. "Do you need help?" Still nothing. I set the phone down and stood up. I didn't want to open the door. I don't know why, but everything in me said not to. Still, I walked over and peeked through the peephole. The porch was empty. I opened the door a crack. Nothing. Cold air seeped in, but no one was standing there. I stepped outside. The steps were bare. The driveway empty. I scanned the street in both directions. No one. I turned back, heart thudding, and pulled up my phone. The live feed now showed an empty porch. The woman was gone. I checked the event history. No alerts. No recordings. I went back inside, locking the door twice, as if the second turn of the bolt would make it safer. I sat on the couch, staring at the phone. My fingers were trembling slightly, not from fear exactly, but from the unsettled feeling of watching something that shouldn't exist. The man the night before, and now this woman. Neither of them had been recorded. Neither triggered motion detection. It was like they only existed when I looked at the live feed. I kept watching for the next hour. Nothing appeared. The following day at work, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every time my phone buzzed with a notification, I half expected it to be from the Ring app, telling me someone was back on my porch, but I got nothing. No activity alerts, no events. When I got home that evening, I unlocked the door quickly, almost expecting to find someone waiting. But the house was quiet, the porch empty. I didn't even bother with dinner. I grabbed my phone, opened the live feed, and set it on the coffee table while I sat on the couch, watching. Minutes turned into an hour, then 2, nothing. By midnight, I was exhausted, but I didn't want to go to bed. Not yet. I turned the TV on, muted, just for background movement while I kept my eyes on the feed. At 12:43 a.m., my stomach dropped. Another figure was there. Not the man, not the woman from last night. Someone else entirely. A tall man, bald, wearing a stained white t-shirt and dark pants. He was barefoot too. His posture was slightly hunched, as if his neck was too heavy for his shoulders. His arms dangled unnaturally low at his sides. I didn't speak. I didn't hit the mic button. I just stared, phone trembling in my hand. This wasn't random. This was something else. I didn't know what, but the idea that 3 strangers would appear like this, each on a different night, and never trigger a single alert, it didn't make sense. I stood up, gripping the phone like a weapon, and crept to the door. My steps were slow and soundless. I peeked through the peephole. Empty porch. I opened the door just enough to stick my head out. Cold air swept against my face. The porch light illuminated the steps and the driveway, both bare. When I turned back to the phone, the live feed was empty again. By now, the anxiety was starting to turn into a dull, restless ache. I sat back down and tried to process what was happening. Was it some kind of technical trick? Could someone be hacking the live feed, playing recorded footage over it? If so, why these people? Why silent, barefoot strangers who vanished the moment I opened the door? I went through every setting in the app. Motion sensitivity, recording options, network settings. Everything looked normal. But something wasn't normal. The following morning I called Adam. "Do you remember the guy we saw on the feed?" "Yeah," he said. "Why? There was another one last night. A woman, standing on the porch barefoot. Dude, call the cops." "And say what? That my doorbell shows me people who aren't really there? They'd tell me to reset my router and stop wasting their time." He was silent for a moment. "Maybe you should uninstall the app, reinstall it, see if it's just a glitch." I promised I would, but I didn't. The app was fine. It was showing me what it wanted me to see. That night, I couldn't stop checking. 8 p.m., nothing. 9 p.m., nothing. 10 p.m., still empty. I sat in the dark living room, the phone glowing on the coffee table. At 11:21, another figure appeared. This time, it was a woman, not the same one as before. She was older, 40, maybe 50. Her long coat brushed her ankles. Her hair was cut short, uneven, like she'd chopped it herself. Her feet were bare and streaked with dirt, like she'd been walking through mud. She stood with her arms at her sides, staring into the camera. I didn't move. I didn't say anything. She was still there after a full minute, after 3. I finally stood and walked to the door, phone in hand. I looked through the peephole. Empty. I yanked the door open. Nothing. When I turned back to the phone, the feed was clear again. No recording, no history, nothing. By now, I was starting to notice a pattern. They never triggered alerts. They never knocked. They never spoke. They appeared only on the live feed and disappeared the instant I tried to confront them. It wasn't fear I felt, it was something worse. Helplessness, like whatever was happening was beyond my ability to document or explain. I tried taking screenshots. That night, I captured an image of the older woman standing in front of the door. But when I checked my gallery later, the photo was corrupted, just a black screen with streaks of static. By 2 a.m., I couldn't stop checking the feed. My body felt like it was made of caffeine and nerves. Every creak of the house made me glance at the door, half expecting it to open on its own. At some point, I realized I hadn't even turned on a light since evening. I was just sitting there, face lit by the phone, watching my own empty porch like it was the most important thing in the world. When the sun rose, I was still sitting there. The live feed was clear, but my chest was tight with unease. I told myself I'd just check one more time that night, just once, but I already knew that wasn't true. I started keeping a notebook. It wasn't something I planned. One morning I woke up, remembered the details of the figure I'd seen the night before. Young woman, short blonde hair, tattered jeans, barefoot again, and realized I couldn't recall her face. I remembered her being there. I remembered the cold dread. But the actual details were fading fast, like trying to remember the layout of a place I'd only walked through once. So I started writing things down. At first, just basic descriptions, time, gender, clothing, whether they looked toward the camera, how long they stood there. After a few nights, I added more detail. Height, posture, if their hands were open or curled, what their hair looked like, if their clothes were wet or dry. Anything that might help make sense of it. The notebook filled faster than I expected. Night after night, always someone new. They never arrived on camera. They were always just standing there the moment I opened the live view, never moving, never making a sound, no motion alerts, no recordings, always alone. I never saw the same person twice. Entry, Tuesday, 11:03 p.m. Man, late 30s, slumped posture, hoodie, sleeves soaked past the elbows, no shoes, staring into the camera, gone when I opened the door. No sound. Entry, Wednesday, 1:19 a.m. Woman, child-sized frame, possibly very short adult, wearing a heavy wool coat, hair dripping wet sticking to her face, eyes half-lidded, hands clenched, did not move. Entry, Thursday, 12:42 a.m. Older man, completely bald, large dark stain across front of shirt, no socks, lips slightly parted, motionless, gone when I opened the door. I took screenshots when I could. At first, the images saved cleanly, though they were always grainy, low-res, like the camera was filming through a screen door even in perfect light. But after a week, the screenshots started to fail. I'd capture one, open my gallery, and find a black rectangle with a date stamp and nothing else. Or the file would appear to exist, but wouldn't open, just a loading wheel that spun forever. Out of the 23 people I'd seen so far, only 6 screenshots saved properly. And even those 6 were starting to show signs of degradation. I opened one of the early photos, the second woman, the one with tangled hair and no coat, and noticed a faint smear across her face that hadn't been there before. Just a slight distortion, like the file had been stretched and smudged at the edge. I compared it to my notebook description. The time matched, the stance matched, but the image itself was eroding. I tried emailing the files to myself, backing them up, even printing one from my laptop. The prints came out blank. My phone had a gallery full of corrupted proof. It was always one person at a time, never more. They came like shifts, different figures at different hours. Some nights it was a teenager, sometimes someone much older, occasionally male, occasionally female. A few stood close enough to the lens that I could make out the details of their skin, dry, cracked, bruised, One woman's eyes were almost completely white, not from lighting or effect, but because her irises were nearly faded. She blinked once. That was the only time I ever saw one of them move on their own before Part 7. And still, not one of them knocked, not one of them touched the door handle. Just stood there, present but inactive, waiting. After nearly 2 weeks, I stopped trying to explain it logically. There were too many of them, too many perfect vanishing acts, too many silent hours leading up to their appearances, and too many blank spaces afterward where my Ring app claimed nothing had happened. I posted on a tech forum, asking if anyone else had experienced Ring feed glitches showing unknown people who didn't trigger alerts. Most of the responses were garbage, people trying to be funny, calling it a ghost story. One guy said I needed to get checked for a carbon monoxide leak. Another asked for screenshots. I posted one of the corrupted ones. They told me it was a broken file and I should reset my camera. I reset the camera, factory default, reconnected Wi-Fi, reinstalled the app. That night, another person appeared. The camera still didn't record. I started staying up later. I didn't mean to, it just happened. I told myself I was being responsible, monitoring things, documenting. But really, I was afraid I'd miss something important if I stopped watching. I brought my phone to the bathroom, to the kitchen, even propped it up beside me when I tried to nap on the couch. I wasn't even sure what I wanted anymore. A pattern? A purpose? All I had were strangers, different every time. Entry, Monday, 3:03 a.m., woman, 40 or older. Long floral nightgown, feet bare and pink with cold, staring down at the porch, not at the camera. Stood for 6 minutes before disappearing. Entry, Tuesday, 2:15 a.m., man, tall, military haircut, thin frame, wearing a hospital gown, one sock. Looked like he'd been standing in water, did not blink. Gone when I opened the door. Entry, Wednesday, 12:50 a.m., woman, young, hoodie pulled low, couldn't see her face, standing sideways, turned slightly toward the door, motionless, no alert triggered. That Wednesday night, I tried an experiment. I left the front door unlocked. It wasn't something I was comfortable doing, but I wanted to see if any of them would enter. If this was leading to something physical, tangible, then I wanted to get ahead of it. I sat on the couch, live feed open. I stared at the screen for hours. Nothing happened. At 3:27 a.m., a young man appeared. He had no jacket. His arms were thin, red with cold. He stood 3 feet from the door, perfectly centered. I leaned closer to the screen, heart pounding. His lips moved. I tapped the mic instantly. "What did you say?" No reaction. I rewound the feed manually. No audio. His lips had moved, but the feed had captured no sound, no log, no clip. When I paused and advanced frame by frame, the distortion made it impossible to make out the shape of the words. I opened the front door. The porch was empty. I locked it again, harder than before. At some point, it stopped feeling like a fluke and started to feel like a routine. I'd wake up, check the app, go through the day waiting to get home, sit down with the phone, take notes, observe. I didn't tell Adam or Marcy anything after that first week. What would I say? Hey, I'm keeping a record of silent people who only exist when I'm looking directly at them. They'd think I was losing it. I probably would have thought that myself if I didn't have half a dozen corrupted screenshots and a notebook full of records. It was real. It just didn't make sense. One night, I fell asleep on the couch with the app open in my hand. When I woke up, the phone had slid to the floor face down. I picked it up, opened the app again. At 3:58 a.m., the feed came up with a figure already standing there. Female, very tall. Her neck tilted slightly, like it couldn't quite support her head. Her arms hung unnaturally straight. She wasn't looking at the camera. She was looking at the door, and for the first time she raised a hand. Not to knock, just lifted it, fingers outstretched, palm halfway open, and held it there, not pressing, not touching, just waiting. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I stared at her for 5 minutes. Then the feed cut to black. When it returned, she was gone. No alert, no footage. I checked the gallery, screenshot corrupted, notebook entry logged. By the end of the third week, I stopped pretending I could go back to normal. The notebook had 27 entries. The corrupted screenshots folder had grown to nearly 60 files, most unreadable. My sleep was irregular, short stretches of uneasy rest on the couch or slumped in the chair by the window, phone clutched in my hand, the Ring app glowing softly beside me like a beacon I couldn't afford to look away from. I wasn't waiting for someone to show up anymore. I was waiting for something to change. That change came on a Thursday night. I remember the time because I just glanced at the microwave clock while passing through the kitchen. 2:09 a.m. I poured myself a glass of water, brought it back to the couch and sat down, placing the phone face up on the armrest. I tapped the screen to refresh the feed. It loaded normally. The porch was empty. I watched for a few minutes. Nothing happened. I turned up the volume slightly, not expecting to hear anything, but just in case. Still nothing. I looked away for a second, just to adjust the blanket on my legs, and when I looked back at the phone, the image hadn't changed. It hadn't refreshed at all. The live feed had frozen. The timestamp in the corner was stuck at 2:12:38 a.m. It wasn't spinning or buffering, just frozen. No motion, no sound, no flickering porch light, no shifting shadows, just one still frame, like a paused video that no longer knew it had been paused. I tapped the screen again. Nothing. I backed out of the live view and re-entered. Same image, still frozen, same timestamp, 2:12:38 a.m. That was when I noticed something. There was a subtle shape, barely visible, pressed close to the lens. Something blurry, just at the edge of the frame. The image was too dark, too grainy to make out clearly, but it looked like the curve of a forehead, pale, unfocused, too close to be in range. I leaned closer to the screen, adjusting the brightness. That shape hadn't been there before. It hadn't been in the frame when I last looked, seconds ago. The porch had been empty. Now there was someone just inches from the lens, and I hadn't seen them arrive. I felt a sick twist in my stomach. I knew the camera angle well enough by now to understand the distance. This figure, whoever they were, wasn't standing at the bottom of the steps. They were right up against the door, directly in front of it. I hit the refresh icon again. Still frozen. I backed out and tried loading the event history. It spun. Then the app crashed, just closed, no warning. Back to the home screen. I opened it again. It loaded normally, like nothing had happened. I tapped live view. This time the feed was active, but the porch was empty again. No one in the frame, no shape near the lens, no frozen timestamp. I checked the event log. Nothing recorded. I scrolled back manually, just in case. 2:12:38 wasn't even listed. I checked my screenshot folder. Nothing new. I closed the app, locked the phone, unlocked it again, and reloaded. Still nothing. The porch sat empty under the same light. And yet, I could still picture that frozen frame. The shape, soft, unfocused, unmistakably human, almost pressing its forehead to the lens like it was trying to see through. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next day, I tried to troubleshoot the issue like it was something technical. I looked up reports of Ring cameras freezing during live feed. I even called customer support. They asked me to reset the device. I told them I already had, twice. They said they couldn't find any logs of interruption from their end. I asked if the camera could possibly be accessed externally, maybe intercepted. They said no. I asked if the feed could freeze independently and resume with a new frame not tied to timestamps. They said that wasn't possible. I asked them if anyone else had ever reported seeing people on the feed who weren't real. The line went quiet for a moment before the rep chuckled awkwardly. You mean like ghost stories? No, I said. Just people. Different every night. No alerts, no recordings, just people. She paused again. Sir, if you're seeing individuals on your feed who aren't there in real life, it's possible there's an issue with motion detection or night vision mode. It's not a hardware issue, I said. They're only visible when I'm watching live. They're never in the recordings. One of them stood close enough to fog the lens. More silence. Then the voice changed slightly, more procedural. If you believe there's a threat to your safety or a physical intrusion on your property, I'd recommend contacting local authorities. I thanked her, hung up, didn't call the cops, didn't see the point. That night, I left the house lights off, just the porch light on. I sat in the living room with the blinds pulled back, watching both the phone and the actual door. The feed stayed clear for over an hour. Then, just past 2 a.m., the screen flickered. It was subtle, less than a second. A frame skip, then another. The porch light flickered once in real life, and the feed froze again. Same as the night before. This time the timestamp read 2:07:19. Again, nothing moved. At first, the image seemed unchanged. Empty porch, undisturbed steps, light buzzing faintly. Then, slowly, I noticed something new. A shadow along the edge of the door frame. Thin, vertical, not quite touching the lens this time. Maybe 4 inches away. The figure wasn't fully visible. Just the corner of a shoulder, the outline of hair over one ear. They were standing just outside the camera's field of view. I held the phone still, hardly breathing. I knew they were there, just out of sight, close enough to lean in if they wanted to. I waited for them to move. They didn't. I hit refresh. Nothing happened. I backed out. App crashed again. When I reopened it, the feed was back to normal, active, porch empty. History still showed no event at 2:07. I walked to the door, opened it slowly. No one outside. I stepped onto the porch, looked up and down the street. Dead quiet. I checked the ring cam housing. There was a faint smear across the lens. Not oily, not a fingerprint. Just a soft fog like breath on glass. I wiped it off with my sleeve, locked the door behind me. The next day I reviewed the logs again. Still no trace of 2:07. I took the notebook out and added the entry, Thursday 2:07 a.m. Figure not fully visible. Partial shoulder, hair visible near right side of frame. Feed froze, timestamp static. No audio, no recording. App crashed during rewind attempt. Porch empty on inspection. Possible fog on lens. I tapped my pen against the paper a few times, then added, behavior escalation, figures now standing closer to camera. Possible intent to obscure lens. Possibly watching. The next 2 nights were quiet. No freezing, no figures. By the 3rd night, I let my guard drop a little. I still kept the app open beside me, but I allowed myself to half-watch a show, zone out for a bit, maybe even doze with the screen glowing. At 3:18 a.m., the feed hiccuped again. This time, it didn't freeze. It stayed live. But for 3 frames, less than a second, something filled the lens entirely. No body, no face. Just pale skin, stretched and warped by the fisheye effect of the camera. Something had passed directly in front of the camera without setting off motion detection. I rewound immediately. The feed stuttered, then the app crashed again. When it reopened, those 3 frames were gone. By the end of the 4th week, my life had shrunk to the frame of the doorbell camera. I barely left the house. I worked remotely, thankfully, and I stopped responding to texts unless they asked something direct. I ate at the coffee table, slept on the couch with the phone in arm's reach. Every night the Ring app was open before the sun dipped behind the houses across the street. Each time a figure appeared, it was always the same pattern. There, then gone. Never more than a few minutes. Never there when I opened the door. Always standing, always silent, always looking. I thought I'd seen every variation. Young, old, thin, large, well-dressed, ragged, but I was wrong. This one didn't disappear. It happened on a Sunday night. The day had been uneventful, and I found myself watching the feed more out of habit than expectation. I'd gone over the corrupted screenshots again that morning, hoping I'd missed something. But they were no clearer than before. Black smears, half images, static trails. My notebook, however, was full. 42 entries, all different, all short appearances, all leaving no trace. Until now. It was 1:12 a.m. when I noticed her. She was already there, like all of them, standing still, centered in the frame. She wore a red sweater, torn at the hem, bare legs, her knees looked bruised. Her hands were folded in front of her. Unlike the others, her eyes weren't locked on the lens. They were closed, just shut. She didn't blink, didn't twitch. She stood there for 15 minutes, then 30. I watched without moving. Every time I shifted my weight, I imagined it would trigger something, that she would raise her head or lift a hand, but she never did. She stayed completely still, as if frozen mid-thought. 45 minutes passed, then an hour. I didn't open the door. For the first time, I didn't even consider it. My hand stayed locked on the phone, my eyes locked on the screen. I didn't want to see the porch in person. I didn't want to give her a chance to disappear. I needed to see how long she would stay. The minutes dragged by in silence. The room was dark except for the light from the phone. My breathing grew shallower, controlled. I tried to shift without making noise, without breaking the spell of the moment. At one point, I turned the volume up slightly, convinced I'd hear something. But there was nothing. Not even the faint background hum the camera usually picked up from passing cars or wind brushing the mic. She didn't move. 2 hours passed. I was exhausted, but I couldn't look away. She stayed. At 3:17 a.m. I blinked, and she was gone. I hadn't looked away for more than half a second, maybe a long blink, maybe the feed stuttered. But she was no longer there. The frame was empty again. Just the porch, just the steps, just the usual angles I knew like the back of my hand. I sat there staring, waiting for her to reappear. She didn't. I backed out of the feed and checked the event log. Nothing. No movement detected. No recording. Not even a still image. It was like the app didn't register the last 2 hours. I tried rewinding manually. The feed jumped from 1:12 a.m. to 3:17 a.m. with no frames in between. No buffer, just silence. I took a screenshot of the empty porch. That one saved fine. Of course it did. I left the lights off and didn't sleep. My body felt like it had passed some threshold into a new kind of stillness, like if I moved too much, I'd provoke something. I sat in the same position until dawn began bleeding through the blinds and the sky started to gray. Around 6:05 a.m. I finally stood. My legs tingled from disuse. I stretched. My joints cracked. It was only then that I realized how stiff I'd been, frozen, just like her. I unlocked the deadbolt slowly, half listening for something on the other side. When I opened the door, the porch looked normal at first. The air was cold and sharp. Birds were chirping somewhere down the block, nothing out of place. Then I looked down. There were footprints, muddy, faint but distinct, just a few. Not like someone had been pacing, no. These were rooted. A single pair of bare footprints pointed directly at the door. The heels were shallow, the toes more defined, as though she'd been putting more pressure on the front of her feet. I crouched and studied them. The feet were small, narrow, toes close together. The left print was cleaner than the right. The right big toe was smeared, like it had twitched slightly mid-stance. They matched her posture from the feet exactly. I backed up, still crouched. No prints leading to the steps. No tracks from the sidewalk. Just 2 prints. No more, no less. As if she had appeared there directly. As if she had never walked up at all. I went back inside, locked the door, and opened the app again. Nothing on the porch. I went to the history tab. Still nothing for the entire night. No event from 1:12 to 3:17. Not even a blank entry, like it had skipped the whole thing. I tried submitting a support ticket, attached the screenshot of the empty porch, explained what happened. 2 hours later, I received a generic reply about adjusting sensitivity settings. The footprints dried over the next few hours. The mud was thin, dusty by noon. I didn't step on them. I didn't sweep them away. By that evening, they had started to fade, but I knew they had been there. Entry, Sunday, 1:12 a.m., 3:17 a.m. Woman, red sweater, torn, bare legs, eyes closed, stood still for over 2 hours, did not move, did not react, disappeared without camera registering exit. App did not record. In the morning, found 2 muddy footprints on porch, both aligned toward front door. No entry trail, no exit trail, ground otherwise dry. The footprints were the final push. Until then, I'd accepted that whatever was happening was limited to the ring feed. As disturbing as it was, it all lived in that screen. Figures appearing in silence, disappearing the moment I looked outside. No recordings, no logs, a private distortion. But the footprints changed that. They were physical, tangible. I saw them dry. I saw them fade. They proved that at least one of those strangers had really been on my porch, in real time in the flesh. So I decided to set up a second camera. Not another smart device, no Wi-Fi, no app, no live feed. I bought a cheap battery-powered trail camera from the hardware store. Something hunters used to track deer. Motion-triggered, SD card, time-stamped. The kind of thing with no brand subscription or cloud syncing. Just capture and store. I mounted it to the tree across the street, camouflaged in the bark, with a clear view of my porch from a diagonal angle. I tested the alignment 5 times, making sure it caught the stairs, the door, even part of the sidewalk in frame. I adjusted the motion sensitivity, set it to record 20-second clips when triggered. Then I waited. That night, I sat in the living room, phone in one hand, trail cam remote in the other, just to feel like I had some control. The ring feed was quiet for hours. Midnight passed. Nothing. At 1:28 a.m., the porch light flickered, and just like that, she appeared, tall, easily over 6 feet. Her posture was rigid, shoulders stiff, hands at her sides. She wore a thin dress, gray and clinging to her frame like damp gauze. Her skin was pale, so much so that her face looked bleached. She didn't tilt her head. She didn't look around. Just stood there, staring straight into the camera lens. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I didn't open the door. This time, I wanted to catch it from both angles. I waited, watching the ring feed, committing every detail to memory. After 2 minutes, I stood and went outside. The street was dead quiet. I crossed to the tree, popped the trail cam case open, and removed the SD card. Back inside, I slid it into the reader and opened the folder. There were 3 clips from that night, 2 from earlier, me walking up to test the angle, and 1 time-stamped at 1:28 a.m., the exact time she appeared. I clicked it. The video loaded in silence. My porch light glowed faintly in the distance. The sidewalk was visible, the steps, the mat, even part of the bushes. No one was there. I replayed the clip, leaning in closer. Still empty. I clicked through the frames manually. Not a single shadow, not a hint of movement. Just a blank porch lit by the same flickering bulb I'd watched her under in real time. I checked the time again. 1:28 a.m. It matched exactly. I backed out and opened the Ring app again. She was still there, still standing, still staring. I looked back and forth between the 2 feeds, the trail cam clip and the live view. On the Ring, tall woman, pale face, unmoving. On the trail cam, nothing. I picked up the phone, flipped to the rear camera, and stepped outside. I walked to the exact angle the trail cam had filmed from and held up my phone to compare. My porch was empty. The Ring app still showed her standing there. That was the first time I realized that what I saw through the app didn't necessarily match what existed in the real world, not even in the same moment. I went back inside and added a new entry. Entry, Monday, 1:28 a.m., tall woman, 6 feet or more, pale skin, thin gray dress, stood still, eyes forward, appeared on Ring feed. Simultaneous footage from trail camera shows no figure present. Complete discrepancy between devices, no signs of physical presence on porch, no sound. The next night I repeated the process. Reset the trail cam, triple-checked the battery, cleared the SD card. I even placed a second motion sensor light on the railing to make sure the porch was well lit. At 2:03 a.m., another figure appeared on the Ring feed. Male, thin, medium build, wearing jeans and no shirt. Long red scratch marks down one side of his chest, as if he'd been dragged. His head was tilted back, just enough that the camera captured the underside of his jaw. His mouth was slightly open. I didn't open the door. I just stared, watched for 4 minutes. Then, gone. No motion alert, no ring recording. I crossed the street and retrieved the trail cam card. The camera had recorded nothing. I tested everything again, switched SD cards, repositioned the angle slightly, set up a second trail cam on the other side of the yard, overlapping the view. The next night, a different woman appeared at 12:49 a.m., long black hair, hooded jacket, one hand in her pocket, the other hanging limp. Her mouth was closed, but the corners of her lips were stretched too wide. Not smiling, just wrong. As if the skin had been pulled too far and never let go. I watched her for 10 minutes. The trail cams recorded nothing. I started leaving physical objects on the porch. A piece of paper taped to the wall with a date written on it, a small plastic toy on the mat, a penny placed heads up near the edge of the step. Each time, when the ring showed someone there, the trail cam showed no one. And when I checked the porch afterward, everything was undisturbed. It was like they weren't physically present. But I'd seen the footprints before. I had watched a woman stand there for 2 hours. I had felt the presence, seen breath fog the lens. Not imagination, not digital artifacts, something real, something that decided when and how to be visible, but only to me, only through that camera. On Wednesday night, I sat in the dark living room, 3 phones and a laptop around me, each open to a different monitoring device. The ring feed, a cheap webcam pointed through the window, a phone camera set to record from the side table, and still, when she appeared, only the ring feed caught her. No other screen displayed a single thing. It was like the lens itself had been turned into a stage, and only the ring camera was invited to the performance. Entry, Wednesday, 12:49 a.m. Female, black hair, hooded jacket, one hand concealed, wide-lipped facial distortion, figure visible only on ring. Trail cams recorded nothing. Auxiliary devices recorded nothing. Physical objects on porch undisturbed. I began to ask myself questions I didn't want to answer. If only one device could see them, then why? Was it the camera, or was it me? Was it the act of watching that made them real? Had I given them a place to appear by staring long enough? And if so, what was I really waiting for? But up until then, they'd all been still. That was part of the fear, the unnatural locked-in posture. The longer it went on, the more I came to rely on it, even as I resented it. I knew where the line was. They appeared, they stood, they disappeared. But then something changed. It was a Thursday night. The feed had been empty for hours. I was halfway through scribbling the last entry in the notebook. Something about the lack of overlapping appearances when the blue light on the ring blinked once. The app didn't alert. It never did. I looked down. There was a woman on the feed, average height, maybe 30. Her hair was frizzy, pulled into a loose bun. She wore a faded hoodie and jeans. Her feet were bare, dirty, cracked at the heels. Her hands hung at her sides, fingers curled, the usual. But her head wasn't centered. It was tilted slightly, just a few degrees, enough that the angle caught my attention. I leaned closer. She was angled away from the lens, her gaze not into the camera, not at the door, but somewhere to the left. I stared harder, trying to see if maybe she had always been standing like that and I'd just missed it. That was when it happened. Her head moved. It turned, slowly, subtly, just a few centimeters. Not jerky, not robotic, not fast, just real. She shifted her head to look at the lens and then stopped. I froze. I didn't breathe. I didn't speak. I didn't even think to press the mic button. It was the smallest motion possible, but after weeks of total stillness, it felt like the earth had tilted. She held that new angle, head slightly turned, eyes now fixed on the lens, on me. I didn't move from the couch. I didn't check the peephole. I didn't dare. She stood like that for 3 minutes. Then, without warning, the feed cut to black for a fraction of a second. When it returned, the porch was empty. No sound, no alert, no recording, no evidence. I wrote it all down immediately. Entry, Thursday, 1:14 a.m. Female, mid-30s, hoodie, jeans, barefoot. Initially appeared slightly off-center. Head turned approximately 10 degrees toward lens over span of 2 to 3 seconds. First confirmed movement from figure. No other motion, no audio. Feed cut briefly. Figure vanished. History empty. I underlined the final line. First confirmed movement. I didn't sleep after that. The next few nights passed without incident. The strangers still came, quiet, unique, unrecorded, but none of them moved. They followed the old rule again, stood in silence, disappeared when ignored or challenged. Still, I watched more carefully now. Every figure became a threat in a new way. I studied their posture, the angle of their shoulders, the bend in their knees, the tension in their fingers. Each one I braced for the slightest twitch, but it never came until 1 week later. It was just after 3 a.m. I'd nearly nodded off in the recliner with the phone resting on my chest. When the blue glow hit my eyes, I jerked up. A man stood on the porch, middle-aged, very tall, clean-shaven, wearing what looked like a mechanic's uniform, though the name tag was scratched or burned off. His sleeves were rolled to the elbow. His arms were covered in grime. One pant leg was torn at the shin, bare feet again. But this time, something was different. His right hand was slightly raised, not fully lifted, not extended, just halfway, like someone debating whether or not to reach forward. His fingers curled softly, held in a loose gesture like he was about to press a button. I stared at his hand. It didn't move. Then, over the course of maybe 20 seconds, he extended one finger, index only, slow, precise. He lifted it toward the doorbell button, but didn't touch it. The motion stopped less than an inch away, and then froze. The feed was silent. The blue LED on the ring wasn't active. No alert, no motion tag, just me watching him nearly press the bell. He held that pose for 5 minutes, finger out, hovering. I couldn't look away. I realized my own hand had gone cold from holding the phone too tightly. Then the feed flickered, and he was gone. Entry, Thursday, 3:08 a.m. Male, mechanic's uniform, dirt-covered arms, lifted right hand toward doorbell, index finger extended, did not touch. Held pose approx. 5 minutes, confirmed slow, deliberate movement, disappeared following brief flicker, feed history blank, no event log. It was harder after that, not because of the movement itself, but because of the waiting. Before, the fear came from knowing nothing would happen, that the strangers would just appear and stare until I broke first. Now, the fear came from not knowing when they'd break their own rule. Would this one move? Would the next one reach the door? Would one raise their hand and knock? Every night I watched the feed with my entire body tensed, shoulders locked, breath shallow, spine curved forward like a coiled spring. I stopped checking my other cameras. I stopped walking to the door. Everything was in that screen now. I kept the phone plugged in at all times, afraid it would die during one of their appearances. 4 nights later, I witnessed a third movement. A woman in a light blue dress, young, long red hair tied loosely. Her eyes were already pointed at the camera when she appeared, no head turn required. But her mouth twitched, not a smile, just the lips parting slightly, barely enough to register. Then her jaw moved a fraction lower, then froze. I waited. She never finished the expression. The feed flickered, and she was gone. Each movement felt more purposeful than the last. Subtle, slow, controlled, not tests, steps. I don't know what the final step looks like. But as I write this, I'm staring at a blank feed, waiting for the next one to appear. I know it's going to happen again, and when it does, something new will follow, something closer. I started watching for motion differently. Not big movements, just the kind that could be dismissed as camera flicker or compression glitches. A shoulder dipping a little too far, a slight head turn that wasn't there the frame before. I wasn't even sure what I wanted anymore, confirmation or proof I was wrong. I just knew that stillness didn't feel stable anymore. It happened while I was microwaving leftovers, the phone balanced against the fruit bowl, ring feed open as usual. The feed blinked once, not a freeze, just a frame skip. When it came back, a figure was already standing there. A man probably in his 40s with a shaved head and a thick jacket zipped up to his chin. His pants were dark and wet at the bottom, no shoes. His skin looked red around the edges like he'd been outside too long. I stopped the microwave, walked back to the table slowly. At first, he just stood like the rest, still, direct. His arms hung straight, fingers curled slightly in the cold, but then his head shifted, just barely. He tilted it maybe 10 degrees to the right, too slow to be accidental, too smooth to be the wind. His chin dropped, then rose again slightly, like he was adjusting his focus. I stood still and stared at the screen. My stomach felt tight. He didn't raise his arms, didn't blink. Just that one motion, just enough to be undeniable. It didn't escalate. He didn't move again. After a minute or so, the feed glitched, another brief black frame, and when it came back, he was gone. Porch clear, no alert, no recording. The microwave beeped behind me like it didn't care what had just happened. I backed out of the feed and opened the camera history. Nothing listed between 1:36 and 1:44. I wrote down the time anyway, just so it wouldn't slip from memory like the others. No words, just numbers. I sat there another half hour before I could eat anything. That was the first movement I could confirm, and after that, the idea of them moving became the only thing I watched for. Every time one of them showed up, I studied their hands, their posture, the way their coat sleeves fell against their sides. I didn't blink much anymore. Not when the feed was live. I started getting headaches, little pulses right behind my eyes. I bought artificial tears from the pharmacy down the block but didn't use them. 3 nights later, another one moved. This time it was a woman, younger, early 20s maybe. Her hair was short and thick, cut unevenly like she'd done it herself. She wore a long coat and jeans, barefoot like always. Her feet were positioned a little wider than usual, not directly under her shoulders. She appeared mid-feed, no alert, no flicker this time, just popped into the frame between seconds. She stood there motionless at first, but then her right arm shifted slightly. She didn't raise it fully, just moved her hand up from her side to about stomach height, then paused. Fingers flexed like she wasn't sure whether to keep going. Then she extended one finger, index, lifted it slowly until it hovered just beside the doorbell, less than an inch away. It didn't touch. The ring didn't light up. She just held it there for 2 full minutes. I watched, half expecting the light to blink blue, the chime to go off, the feed to freeze. Nothing happened. The finger stayed raised, no contact. Then the hand dropped slowly back to her side. She never looked at the camera. Her head remained slightly downturned the entire time. After another minute of stillness, the screen cut to static. Not a clean cut, just a brief single-frame distortion like tearing tape. When the image stabilized, she was gone. I didn't get up from the couch. I didn't check outside. I didn't want to see an empty porch. I just refreshed the feed, watched the live view for 20 more minutes, and set the phone face down on the table. I didn't touch it again until morning. The next few nights were empty. Feed after feed of still figures, same routines. No movement, nothing lingering. But I could feel the tension behind it. Like watching a film where you know someone's going to jump, but you don't know when. Every new face arrived with that pressure. I started pacing while I watched. Couldn't sit still for long. Sometimes I found myself muttering at them, things like, "Don't move" or "Stay there." I wasn't even conscious of it until I caught myself one night, whispering "not yet" over and over like a reflex. Then, on the 5th night after the woman with the finger, another man appeared. Average height. He wore a dark gray hoodie and had one pant leg rolled up to his knee, revealing a long bruise on his shin. His arms were longer than usual, or maybe it just looked that way because of how low they hung. He didn't move for the first 5 minutes. Then his mouth opened slightly. No sound came through. The ring mic didn't register anything, just the live feed of his lips parting slowly and then closing again. Then he opened them wider, then shut them, once, twice. He wasn't speaking. It looked more like he was trying to stretch something that hadn't been used in a while. Then he froze again. The feed didn't cut. He stood like that for another 3 minutes, then vanished between blinks. Nothing in the history, no event. I went back and wrote down the time. I didn't even describe the motion this time. I just drew a box around the entry and marked a tally next to it in the margin. Later that week, one of them arrived already in motion. I caught it mid-gesture. A woman, arms half raised like she'd been reaching and stopped. Her left hand hovered at shoulder height, palm open, fingers splayed. She wasn't facing the camera head on. Her body was turned slightly, angled toward the door. She never completed the motion. Her hand didn't rise any higher. It also didn't lower. She held that pose for almost 7 minutes. Then the screen flashed gray for half a second and went still. Gone again. The app started glitching more after that. Shorter refresh cycles. A new bug where the blue LED light would flicker on even when the app wasn't open. Once it turned on while I was in another room. I came back to find the feed active, no one on the porch, but the history logged no event. I hadn't opened it. I hadn't touched the phone. I disabled the motion alert feature entirely. It wasn't working anyway. All it did now was remind me how blind the camera had become to everything I was seeing. Every night since that first glimpse of movement, I'd kept the phone within reach. The ring feed lived open now, an ever-present screen. I watched the way some people kept TVs on for background noise. The porch had become its own kind of show, except no one ever performed. They just stood there. One night I was brushing my teeth when I heard the motion chime. My heart tapped a little faster. I spit, wiped my mouth, and walked straight back to the phone on the couch. The feed loaded slowly. That always happened when something was already in view. It gave a brief stutter, the circle spinning once, twice, and then the porch appeared. It was empty. I sat down confused. The motion chime only triggered when something crossed into the field of view. If it had gone off, something had to have been there. I tapped live view again, even though it was already streaming. The porch flickered, but still showed nothing. Then the feed blinked. Not a glitch or crash this time, just a full-frame hiccup. The porch disappeared. For a full second, the screen turned black, then returned, but now the angle was wrong. It was no longer looking at the door. It was looking out toward the street. The horizon line was lower. The porch light's wash didn't reach this far. The image was grainier, darker, but it was clear the camera had moved. Somehow, it was looking past the sidewalk, all the way to the opposite curb. There were people in the road, 6 of them. I counted instinctively, like I was playing some involuntary game. They weren't together. Each stood spaced apart by a good 15 feet, like fence posts. None were on the sidewalks. They all stood in the street, their backs lit faintly by the orange glow of distant street lamps. All of them were facing my house. None of them moved. The frame vanished again, just cut out. The app didn't crash. The phone didn't freeze. The feed simply ended. It flicked back to the porch like nothing had happened. I stared at the screen. Nothing now but an empty doormat and the quiet buzz of the porch light. I tapped the screen with both thumbs, rewinding by 10-second intervals. Nothing but the porch. No angle shift. No road. No people. I closed the app, reopened it. Still nothing. My ears were ringing. I realized I hadn't exhaled. I did so shakily and set the phone on the table. I looked at the curtains, hesitated, then walked to the window and pulled them open an inch. The street was still there, stretching off into the darkness. No movement, no figures. But I knew what I'd seen. They weren't trying to be seen. Not normally. That was the difference. That feed, that angle, wasn't for me. It was never meant to be shown, which meant the glitch was a mistake, and maybe not just a technical one. Maybe they messed up. The thought came as a whisper inside my head. Not even a full thought, just a creeping suggestion, quiet and parasitic. They're watching you too. I thought about the pattern, the individuals showing up, different every night, never returning. I'd thought they were appearing at random lone figures showing up one at a time. But what if it wasn't random? What if it was coordinated? What if the one I saw each night was just the one whose turn it was to stand in front of the lens? What if the others were always there, just out of view? Maybe the camera didn't shift on its own. Maybe someone turned it. I opened my closet and pulled out the spare Nest cam I'd bought 2 years ago but never used. It took me about 30 minutes to find the charger and get it connected. I wasn't tech savvy, but I didn't need to be. All I needed was a second view, something to see the street. I positioned it in the upstairs window, the one in the guest room that faced the front of the house at an angle. I adjusted the blind so the camera had a clean line of sight without being obvious. The phone app showed the feed coming through clearly. I set a motion alert zone to cover the road, saved the settings, and backed out. Then I sat in the living room and waited. I kept the Ring app open on one phone and the Nest app open on another. I stared at both screens as if I were in a control booth. Nothing happened for hours. Then, just after 2 a.m., the Ring chime went off again. I stared at the Ring feed, empty. I flipped over to the Nest feed. 6 people stood in the road. Same spacing, same direction, all facing toward me. I froze. I hadn't heard them arrive. The Nest cam hadn't picked up any motion until they were all in place. The footage had no transition. No walking into frame, no shadows creeping in from the edge. One moment the road was empty. The next they were just there. I tapped to take a screenshot. The app glitched, not crashed, just froze. The screen pixelated. When it finally responded again, the figures were gone. Both cameras now showed nothing. Just the road, the porch, clean, empty. The log showed no footage saved. I stood and went to the guest room window. I opened the curtain slowly, lifting just the corner. The road was silent. Of course it was. The next day, I bought another camera. This one was infrared enabled. I mounted it above the garage and aimed it high, catching a full view of the block. I even bought one of those trail cams and set it across the street, facing my house. I wanted to see them from all angles. I needed to. I didn't tell anyone. Not my coworkers, not my neighbors, not even a friend on Reddit. I'd long since stopped trying to make sense of it out loud. This wasn't a ghost story. It wasn't about proof anymore. It was just about watching. The next night, I didn't even wait for the Ring chime. I opened all 3 feeds and set them in a triangle on the table, then sat in the middle, turning my eyes from screen to screen. Nothing until 2:23 a.m. The Ring showed a man standing on the porch. Bald, wearing what looked like a hospital gown, with one arm visibly broken at an unnatural angle. The Nest cam showed 5 more people in the road. The garage cam showed all 6, and 3 more. 9 total. No movement, every one of them facing my house. I tried to screenshot every angle. Every app locked up the moment I tapped. When I checked my phone's gallery later, each image was corrupted. All that remained were warped thumbnails, blurs of gray and pink static. They had me surrounded. The next morning, I checked the porch before opening the door. No footprints, no smudges on the glass, no sign that anyone had been there at all. I opened the app again. The same thing, no history, just empty logs and a working live feed. I switched to the sidewalk cam, nothing unusual. Later that day, I talked myself into believing it was some kind of bug, maybe a cached frame, a late-night glitch. The thought didn't settle right, but it was easier to work with than the alternative. That night, I stayed up again. I left the Ring app open on the coffee table and let it run. I must have dozed off because I woke up in the middle of the night and glanced at my phone. It was 3:12 a.m. The Ring app was still open. There was someone standing on the porch again. This one was closer than any of the others, inches from the camera. The lens caught the soft contours of a forehead, a ridge of bone, the tip of a nose. The eyes were just out of frame, but I could feel them. Felt like if I tilted the phone a certain way, I'd catch them staring directly at me. I tapped the mic icon. Can I help you? No movement, no sound. The figure didn't shift, didn't blink. I stared at the screen and listened for anything in the house. Nothing, not even the settling of the walls. Just silence. I spoke again, louder this time. Hey, I can see you. What do you want? Still nothing. I kept one eye on the screen and the other toward the hallway that led to the stairs. I could just barely make out the dim line of light from the porch coming through the edges of the door's window. It wasn't interrupted, no shadows, no motion. But then the figure on the screen lifted a hand, slowly, deliberately. The movement was fluid but careful, like they were making sure I saw every part of it. Their hand rose until it hovered in front of the lens, then drifted down and slightly out of frame. I stared. Their hand settled on something. I could tell by the slight tension in the wrist, the way the elbow dipped. And then the doorknob on the screen turned. My heart skipped. I sat up fully in bed, screen inches from my face. The door began to open. On the feed only. Just a crack at first, then wider. The figure leaned forward, stepping through the opening. The porch light backlit them, casting long shadows into what should have been the house. But the feed didn't show the foyer or living room, only blackness beyond the threshold. The figure vanished into it, and the feed froze. Not glitched, not distorted, just frozen. A single frame locked in place, showing the door ajar and the porch empty. I tossed the blanket off and got out of bed, moved fast but quiet down the hall, down the stairs. The house was silent. When I reached the front door, it was shut, deadbolt horizontal, chain latch untouched. I reached out and tested the handle. Solid. I opened the Ring app again. It restarted like it had been closed for hours. No feed, no activity log, no motion alerts, no playback available. I stood there for several minutes, holding the phone in one hand, the other resting lightly against the cold metal of the deadbolt. Nothing about the house felt wrong, and that was almost worse. By morning, I tried downloading diagnostics from the app, hoping to find some sort of technical explanation. But the data logs for the night were clean. No interruptions, no crashes, no loss of connection. I called support and told them I was concerned about recording reliability. I didn't mention what I'd seen. They told me the last recorded event was 3 days ago. I asked if it was possible someone had deleted footage. They said all activity was auto-logged and could be recovered. There was nothing to recover. They asked if I wanted to submit a ticket. I told them no and hung up. I started leaving lights on around the house, hallway, stairwell, the kitchen overhead. Not all at once, never enough to feel like I was waiting for something, but enough to make shadows shallower. I pushed furniture up against the side door, slid a wedge under the garage door, started locking my bedroom door at night, even though it didn't have a proper key. I wasn't afraid of someone breaking in. I was afraid that someone already had. Every night after that, the feed stayed blank. I still checked, every hour. I left the phone open beside me while I dozed, set alarms to wake me up at random intervals. But the camera never picked up another visitor. It should have been a relief. Instead, I became more aware of how quiet the house was, how still. Every sound felt weighted, the creak of a board, the tick of the thermostat. I'd turn toward them and find nothing. I opened the door every morning after sunrise and looked for footprints, smudges, anything. But the porch was always clean. One night, close to a week after the last sighting, I left the Ring app open and set the phone face up on the nightstand. I woke up without knowing why. No sound had triggered me, no light, just instinct. I looked at the phone. The screen was dark, like it had timed out. But when I tapped it, the Ring feed opened on its own. There was no figure this time, just the porch. Still. Then, without a sound, the image shifted slightly. Not a figure entering the frame, not a flash or a blur. Just a shift in the light, like something had passed close to the lens but never appeared. And then it was gone. I tapped the mic. Hello? No response. Then the feed flickered, One quick frame, and for half a second I saw the porch light illuminate something at the edge of the steps. It looked like the edge of a coat. The screen went black, then came back. No one there. I sat up slowly, not daring to move too fast. Listened. Not even the refrigerator hum. I opened the Ring app's history. No events recorded, same as always. But something had changed. I could feel it in the stillness. The door was still locked. I got up and checked it again. Bolt turned fully, chain secure. But I didn't go back to bed. I just sat in the hallway with the lights on, phone in hand, waiting for the feed to show me something else. It never did that night. I didn't sleep the next night. Not really. I left the bedroom light on, the hallway light too, and kept my phone on the nightstand with the Ring app open. Nothing showed up, just the empty porch, for hours. It was like none of it ever happened. No notifications, no corrupted feed, no faces in the dark staring silently into the lens. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. It wasn't just that the live feed showed someone entering the house. It was the way the app erased it afterward. Like it never happened. Like it didn't want me to remember. But I did. I remembered the way the knob turned, how the stranger stepped inside without even a sound, how the feed froze and my chest locked up. I started walking around the house every hour or two, checking each room, the locks, the windows, the closet in the hallway. I kept the front door bolted, double-checked the chain, and even propped a chair under the knob like it was a motel trick. My friends stopped coming over. I think they got tired of me talking about it, showing them screenshots that didn't save, videos that wouldn't play, or asking them to sit and watch the feed with me for hours just in case something showed up. They didn't believe me. I could see it in their faces. They thought I was losing it. Sometimes I thought I was too. The following nights were blank. The live view stayed normal. No faces, no glitches. Just porch light, brick, the edge of the railing, and the familiar corner of the mailbox. That bland, boring piece had never felt so threatening. I couldn't relax, couldn't even pretend. And then, tonight, something changed again. At exactly 3 a.m., I didn't touch anything, but the app opened. It was already on my screen when I looked down, like it had been launched by someone else. The camera was live, but it wasn't pointed at the porch anymore. It had tilted slightly, shifted downward, angled off-center toward the welcome mat. The figure was back. I felt it in my gut before my eyes confirmed it. They were standing with their back to the camera, just on the left edge of the view. Tall, maybe 6 feet, with a long padded coat, a hood pulled up. Their shoes were wet, darker than the rest of the image. They were facing the front door, not the lens, not looking in this time, just waiting. The stillness hit me harder than anything else. They didn't fidget or lean or glance around like a normal person would. No movement at all. I stared at the phone, half expecting the screen to glitch or the app to crash like it always did. But it didn't. Instead, the figure slowly reached into their coat pocket. Their arm moved fluidly, like they knew exactly where it was. No rush, no hesitation. Their hand came out holding something small, metallic. I squinted at the feed, trying to make it out, and my breath caught. It was a key. I don't know how I knew it. I didn't see it glint or reflect light. I didn't hear it jingle. But I knew. Somehow, I knew. They crouched slightly, raised their arm again, and brought the key to the door. The feed stayed clear. No static, no corruption. The key slid into the lock and the figure unlocked it. The doorknob turned easily without resistance, and the door creaked open. But I heard it. In real life. The soft creak of the deadbolt sliding out. The gentle swing of the hinge. No footsteps, no breathing. Just the door. I stared at the phone. The feed hadn't frozen. The camera still showed the porch, but now the figure was gone. The door was open, darkness beyond, and then it closed. The feed showed it, smooth and quiet. The door swung shut behind whoever had entered, and I heard that too, the latch catching, the faint final sound of wood against frame. My hands are shaking as I write this. I don't know what just walked into my house. I don't know how it had a key. I don't know how the door unlocked itself when I know I locked it. I don't know why the app won't save anything or why the motion alerts never go off. I just know they're somewhere in here. If anyone ever reads this, the feed showed them opening the door, but I just heard it happen. I know they're inside now. I'm going to check. I just need to know if someone's really here. I'll be right back.